This podcast is brought to you by Cyber attacks can be prevented. Checkpoint. You deserve the best security.
Hi, everyone. It's still summer. In Tel Aviv, at least, that means it's a gazillion degrees outside, and it feels like walking in chicken soup. Wherever Jonathan is in the world, location secret, but I hope it's better weather, Jonathan?
It certainly is. Not better than the way you are in terms of just sheer degree of heat, but it's better than I think I would have got at home. Mm-hmm. It certainly feels better because that's the point of being on vacation. And the sun is shining, even if it's metaphorically, just by having a break. I think the listeners have deserved it. It's been a hard year for everyone. But we have a little summer treat for you. Each week that we're not providing a brand new edition of Unholy, it's a chance to listen again to some conversations we have loved. Yonit and I have had, we love every week's episode, of course. Yonit will tell you them all by numeric order. But some conversations we love to listen to again. And one of them is the guest that we spoke to. Well, when did we speak to, Yonit? Remind me.
It was in May. We spoke to Mayim Bialik, who's an actress, a producer, a writer, podcaster, by the way. She's also the host of Jeopardy, and also, for our purposes, grandniece of Chaim Nachman Bialik. Also, very important yichus, we should point out.
That is serious.
That's
and
very
also
serious.
Confirmed now as the, proper full-time established host of Jeopardy, which is a sort of iconic position in the American TV landscape. So she is a big deal on American TV. I think when we spoke to her, she had just completed a big film that got a lot of attention, really interesting, talking about her personal experience with grief and the Jewish rituals around grieving, the Shiva, the Kaddish. So it was we sort of went there in this conversation. I think we got into some very good stuff with her, and she was very candid, very open, and I think people will enjoy hearing, once again, our conversation with Mayim Bialik.
So, Jonathan, do you want to set us up Jeopardy style?
Yonit, I will take famous Jews for 400.
This actress is also a game show host, a neuroscientist. Her first directorial debut, the film How They Made Us, is out now. She's a great, great, great niece, I believe, of Chaim Nachman Bialik. I gave you all the clues, Jonathan.
Who is Mayim Bialik?
Very good. Who is Mayim Bialik?
There we are, 400.
We are so privileged to talk to you today, Mayim. Thank you so much for coming on Unholy.
Thank you. I'm surprised, maybe it could have been a daily double. Maybe next time.
I don't want to give him too much money. He does, silly stuff with it. I think it's okay. $400 for him is fine. Wow, we have so many things to talk about today. And I think I'll probably, I should open up with your film, which is really your directorial debut. And it's called As They Made Us. You wrote this after your father's death. It's about a family indeed coping with a father's decline, and the daughter has to basically deal with all this. Can you tell us a little bit about how this came about and how much of a passion project this is for you? And again, the first time that you're writing and directing. This is really a first for you.
Yeah, obviously I've written other things, but never wrote a screenplay. And my father, Zichrono Livracha, he passed away. It was just 7 years ago. He died on Pesach, actually. And I followed the very kind of structured year of mourning that traditional Judaism, has been doing for a few thousand years. And I found that year very cathartic, all the things. And it was actually after my year lifted that I started feeling a need to write things down. And, long story short, that's what I started doing. I wrote first kind of images, and a lot of music was coming to me. And it's not like it was like memories I didn't have. It was just things started coming together with visual components that I started writing down. And I originally wrote in prose, and then showed it to someone very close to me. And he suggested that I turn it into a script, which I didn't even own the program, called Final Draft, that you actually write scripts, and I'd never written a script. So what I did is I wrote, and a lot of it, yes, is true. And much of it is not as well. There are things that didn't happen, which means it's not an autobiography. It's not a memoir. But I got this unbelievable cast who really loved this script and wanted to be in it. So Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen play the parents. Diana Agron, many people know her from Glee and also Shiva Baby. And Simon Helberg from The Big Bang Theory. He is in it. And it's this family, exactly like you said. And there's a lot of flashbacks and kind of this notion that the things that happen to us stay with us, even if they're not in our kind of conscious memory. It's a very visually kind of specific film, and it's a very musically specific film. And it follows this woman who's in kind of that sandwich generation of, caring for her own children and also her parents as they become quirkier and in many ways more difficult as they get older. And it is a Jewish film, meaning it's a family. It's a family that happens to be Jewish, but I didn't set out to make a Jewish movie. I did use a lot of the things from my life and put them in the movie. Again, not to make any sort of particular statement, but that's the family that I wanted to show. And in particular, the Jewish traditions surrounding mourning are, I found very uplifting and also very visually interesting to shoot. And so that is As They Made Us. And you can get it on like Amazon Prime, or you can get it on like iTunes. It was in some theaters here, but it's a small film, and that is sort of the story with that movie.
With the year of mourning, I'm very struck by what you say about that. I've been through that myself more than once, and there is something creative about the process, and I don't quite know what it is, but you're not the only person who has been found that a creative project has come out of the end of going through that. And I think of Leon Wieseltier's book, Kaddish, but there are other examples. Right. And I mean, my own feeling is it's something that Jews really get right, that year of mourning. It's psychologically very kind of insightful, but not just the year, the shiva, everything. But tell us what it was about that year that you've put into the film and that sparked you creatively, because I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like saying Kaddish for a year is not for everyone. And if you want to go to Minyan every day, there are certain denominations of Judaism that make it very clear that it's not for everyone. So I also... Meaning not for women, you mean? I was able to recite Kaddish everywhere that I traveled. I was in many places around this country and also in Israel. So the best way to know that you can recite Kaddish is to go to an Orthodox minyan, because they have them every day. So I mainly said Kaddish in many communities that wouldn't count me. And so it was a fascinating year as a woman also to experience that. And many people, especially people who were kind of surprised by the intensity of the film, because it's very emotional. It's a very raw set of performances. They asked if it was cathartic making the movie. And I said, no, the catharsis came before. That's what allowed me to make the movie, was traditional Judaism is not for everyone. And structured, for me, I happen to resonate a lot with halachic Judaism. And that year, I can't say that I think everyone should say Kaddish for a year because it makes you creative. What it does is it forces you to be with yourself in ways that you never have been before in a world without the person you're mourning. So I had a really, really sometimes frustrating, sometimes anger producing, sometimes beautiful, deeply sad experience in that year. But what I was doing was I was learning something new in honor of a person who died. It's like life is for the living, right? And that's a huge component of the Jewish experience, is we're very much about what happens, what we eat, how we act, how we speak, how we grieve. And yes, for all the things that a lot of people feel Judaism gets wrong, and I got a couple on my list, we know how to do death and mourning. We figured it out, like make you sit in one place, don't let you be alone, walk around the block when the first week is over, mark the first month, and then just do not run from your feelings. So for me, what happened when I couldn't run is that I started looking. And for me, what came was, again, like an emotional catharsis that for me led to wanting to kind of put it down on paper. But I think that process can be, fulfilling even if you don't write a screenplay after.
I completely agree.
It's interesting. I heard you talk about the film, and you always say, I wrote this and I waited for a real screenwriter to come along. And then they told me that's okay. And then I waited for a real director to come along, and I realized I can do it. And it's so interesting because you at the same time wrote a book that kind of it really empowers girls in young women. It's called Girling Up, How to Be Strong and Smart and Spectacular. And I wondered how that works together. That feeling of, on the one hand, not feeling good enough to do this, and then saying to girls and to young women, you have to feel good enough to do this.
It's a really interesting question. I haven't been asked that, and the answer is when I wrote Girling Up, I also wrote Boying Up, which is that came after
That's for Jonathan. The Girling Up is
That's right. It's for the boys. Well, or for any female person who wants to, maybe better understand what is going on in there. But for me, I wrote the book that didn't exist when I was a kid. And, I was raised by two feminists. Both my parents were progressive. They were civil rights activists. Like, I was raised by two feminists who did the best they could from being born in World War II, as the black sheep of their family, in being liberals who, were tear gassed at Washington, fighting for all the things. So for me, my personality is such that the culture I was raised in and what I'm like, I do have a very hard time still as a woman asserting myself. One of the things I noticed actually while working on this film was how much I used the phrase "I think" in an email when I actually didn't think. It was what I knew. So instead of, "I think I'd like to start at 6 a.m. tomorrow," what I meant was, "I'd like to start at 6 a.m.
That sounds very familiar. That sounds very familiar to me.
You might be secretly British though, because I begin every. Yonit will testify that I say, "I wonder if."
Well, I think that's, that is definitely a colloquialism from a culture that, it's true, is not mine. But I think for a lot of, I had the experience I think that a lot of women have. And it was actually my ex-husband who, when I said, like, "I don't know if I can make this movie, I never done," he said, "If you were a dude right out of film school, you'd be like, I'm gonna make a movie. It's gonna be amazing." And I was like, you know what? You're probably right. And I also think it's okay for there to be lots of different kinds of women, just like there are lots of different kinds of men. And that is something I still struggle with. And, I'm raising two boys, but, I believe that we should all raise feminists in terms of people who understand the importance of the emphasis of the special qualities that women have while not degrading those that men have, and seeking for, equal representation. And yes, the right to your body and your privacy as well while we're at it.
I mean, a lot of those views, you obviously completely channel them your own way, but they would not be, unpopular among liberal Hollywood types. And yet there are some views you offer and express which are not immediate sort of crowd pleasers, I would guess, in movie making circles. And I'm thinking of the fact you're out there with the Z word or Z word. You say you're a Zionist, you use that word. A lot of people will think that's a word that people steer clear of, very often misunderstood. You say it, you use it. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, I went to UCLA. I went to a very fine public university. And, I was there at the time when affirmative action wasn't a dirty phrase, meaning that was seen as an empowering thing that many universities were doing. Obviously, the climate has shifted, but, it was the beginnings of, swastikas being chalked outside of Jewish events. It was the beginning of Zionism is racist. I mean, we had never heard those things, in the early 90s and mid 90s on a campus like that. And so, I also was kind of raised in a liberal progressive academic environment where I absolutely believe in free speech. I absolutely believe in healthy conversation about the policies of all sorts of governments, including that of Israel, which I consider, my historic and cultural and religious and spiritual homeland. We now see that has grown into a much, 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 much larger movement, especially on campuses. And one of the things that is the most disturbing to me, which it's so funny. My family in Israel is like, "We're so proud of you." I refuse to think of the word Zionist or Zionism as a bad word. I refuse. And I remember when there was a thing on my Facebook and someone said, "Did you know she's a Zionist?" And it was as if the word was, God forbid, fascist or God forbid, Nazi. I mean, this is the other conversations around that. And the reason that I chose to kind of speak out more about it is that many of my young fans I have fans, all over the world from many places where they know very little about, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. People started coming to my defense and saying, "Mayim's not a Zionist. She's such a nice person. She would never be a Zionist." And that's when I realized, oh no, this is just a definitional problem. So I literally just started defining what Zionism is, because I saw that people literally didn't even know what it meant. So, yeah, it's not a popular place to be, but like I said, to me, it's not, I refuse to think of that as a bad word. It's not. There are many people who are Zionists who do bad things. There are also many people who are socialists and liberals and Republicans who do bad things. Like the word in and of itself is the right to an autonomous and safe and free country. That's what it was made for. That is my home. That's what it is. That's what Zionism is.
Talk to us a little bit more about, you say that is my home. Explain that a little bit more to us. How does that feel with you? How does that resonate with you?
It's a very funny identity. I get very emotional about it because, I didn't go to Israel till I was 16 years old. I didn't meet most of my family in Israel until I was 16. And, back then it was like, we could maybe afford like a phone call a month so my mother could hear her sister's voice, like it was so different to grow up across the world from family without Zoom and without phones and computers and, all those things. So I had a really transformative experience in Israel for the first time. My soundtrack, if anyone's wondering, was U2's Rattle and Hum, which is a phenomenal album. And forever, I remember it was raining and it was Hanukkah at the Kotel, like the first time I went to the Kotel, and it was unbelievable. Like I had that experience with my family and there's places I've never been because I didn't go on Ulpan or I didn't go on Birthright. Like I've never been to the Galil, there's things that I want to do. But I did all the highlights of Yerushalayim, and I've been to, Eilat, and I've done Tel Aviv and, most of those parts of the country. And I have been to Haifa. And then I went back about every year and a half, every 2 years. And the climate that we live in now, without sounding like a paranoid Jew, it doesn't feel good. I have many friends who've stopped wearing a yarmulke since Trump, and that's very painful. It's scary in the city I live in. There have been attacks at places that I go, and I grew up with places that I went in Israel being bombed. So it's terrible. It's terrible to feel that. And I've raised my children to know that there's a place. There's a place that is ours, and that we can have citizenship there. If we pay our taxes, we can have citizenship there. And that is our home. That's the place where we go. And there are many problems with a lot of the policies of the state of Israel, just like there are many problems with the policies of the state of the country that took my family in when there was nowhere else to go. And that is the place where a large portion of my family has, they've been pioneers. They have made the desert bloom themselves with their hands. And I don't agree with all the places that my family lives, but that's our home. That's where we go. That's where we know our safety is. That's what that means. But we do all agree that Israel is home.
You saying Israel is home, I just wonder, I mean this seriously, people who watch Jeopardy, and that's a huge part of America's national life. You've got a place there that makes you a kind of national treasure, and yet you're saying your home is somewhere else, not America. And you didn't qualify particularly. You said that's my home, and I'm very struck by that.
No, and I think also I'm also a diehard patriot. My grandparents showed up on the shores of Manhattan with nothing, and this country took them in. Country had a lot of complexity around how it took people in as well. But this is where they came. They didn't speak English, and my mother's parents actually never really commanded the English language. They came to a place that had a dozen newspapers in Yiddish. Like this was, that is also my home, and I hate to say that the place where you go when you're scared is your home. But for me, it's not just that, I love America in all its complexity because it is the place that saved us, saved my family. It's a very Jewish concept to be able to hold two things in one place. And meaning one
to have two homes
in your heart. Exactly. That's what I'm a product of, the Soloveitchik kind of line of modern Orthodoxy of if you're not feeling tension, you're probably not thinking hard enough, right? This is our existence as Jews. We wander and we're displaced and we blend in, but also we don't. And it's okay. We can both be universalists and we can be very, 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 very specific.
Has it become harder for you to sort of defend that I'm a staunch Zionist position, like over
Of
the
course,
years,
like
become
the
more and
news
more-
doesn't look so good.
Yeah, we know that.
Israel needs a new publicist. My publicist is terrific. Maybe like the whole country could use a little boost. Yes, this is what it's like to be in the diaspora. Like we're far. And I also feel like, for people who either have never been there or who have never spent an extended period of time there or who have never, chosen to pioneer a life there, it's very easy to sit in judgment and know what it feels like. But I've spent extensive periods of time there. I've gone when there's bombings. I've gone when there aren't. I've gone before the Intifada, the second Intifada. I've done all the things that that I've been able to. And there are many places in the world where I'm not welcome because I go to Israel, and that's devastating to me. A lot of people don't know that. To be a public Jewish person is a very interesting position to be in. But like I said, I've learned pretty quickly that a lot of people, they don't want to talk. They don't want to know. They don't want to hear. They don't like Israel, and they don't like Jews.
So I want to ask something about your career. We've been talking about Israel and Judaism, and I want to say this because it really isn't a standard Hollywood career if such a thing exists, right? I mean, you started as a child star, Blossom, Beaches. You took a 12-year hiatus, got a PhD in neuroscience, and then had two children, another important thing in a biography for sure. And then sort of catapulted back to fame as Amy Farrah Fowler in The Big Bang Theory. I mean, it's a huge stardom and success. This is really an unusual route, isn't it, to take?
Oh yeah, this is not, and also it wasn't planned that way. This is like putting one foot in front of the other and seeing what happens in life. Yeah. The reason I returned to acting after 12 years, and, I'm sure you'll both laugh at this, like I ran out of health insurance because being a graduate student, they give you like a year and then it's like, okay, good luck in the universe, finding health insurance. So I literally went back to acting because
acting was a safe place to go back to?
Well, I wasn't planning on being a regular on a TV show. I never thought that would happen. I was teaching neuroscience for 5 years after I got my degree. I taught Hebrew, I taught piano. I was like teaching with a baby strapped to my chest. My hair was down to my tush. Like I was like a hippie chick. I was not, and I started auditioning literally just to, try and get just like a couple even small jobs to try and start getting, you get like credits towards insurance when you're an actor. That's how our union works. I had never seen The Big Bang Theory. I thought it was a game show. I didn't know that I was going to be a regular on a TV show. So, all these things like just kind of, they happen. And obviously neuroscience was a huge commitment. It was 12 years of my life. And, having my first son in grad school and I took my doctoral hood pregnant and had him after getting my degree. So definitely not, a straight derech, but that's just, everybody's got theirs and that's mine,
Do you miss the neuroscience?
I miss being in an academic environment. Yes.
You're telling me Jeopardy is not an academic environment?
Well, that's the thing. It's a very intellectual.
Troubling.
No, it's a very intellectually stimulating environment, but being a scientist with a specialization means you're studying, all things around your specialty. And I had an incredible year of seminars in the Department of Neuroendocrinology where we studied gender and sexuality long before anybody was talking about it in the public media because it's been part of the scientific literature for quite some time. So I miss that, I miss being around those kinds of conversations. And yeah, it's very different being in front of the camera. Like, now people care what my hair looks like, whereas in grad school, nobody cared.
I read somewhere, by the way, that you started the Hollywood career, as your father took a picture of you, sent it to agents and said, this kid looks like Barbara Streisand. And
it was my parents. Yeah, my mom.
That's true.
That's true. I have a copy of the letter still. They typed it on a very fancy, those like electric typewriters. Remember when those came out and we couldn't believe that, it could do that? Yeah, my mom typed a letter. My dad just took a picture of me and they said, this is who she looks like. And I like vaguely knew who those people were. I was like, oh, other Jewish people? Because nobody else looked like me on television in 1986. Like this is kind of what I looked like, just on a smaller body. So yeah, that was how
I watched Blossom. I remember this. I mean,
yeah, I was 14 when Blossom came out. I was 14 to 19.
And it's funny that you say no one else looked like that.
Blossom was supposed to be about a boy. We had to fight to do a show about a girl. There wasn't a primetime show about a girl at that time, and nobody thought people would watch. But yeah, I didn't have success in commercials, which is what most kids do because they didn't, ethnic was not what they cast for. You know, the look was what they called all American, which is like a joke now. Because I went to public school in Los Angeles. Like most people didn't, like most people were, I grew up with Black kids, with Asian kids, with kids who had just emigrated from Mexico and Central America. Like what's all American, you know?
We're talking
among Jews, like everybody's like, oh yeah, she looks like half the people in my family. Like, cause I'm Polish and Hungarian and Ukrainian. So like, just put it all together and we're bound to look alike at some point. Me and most Jews.
This looks like a Shabbat dinner to me, like the three of us.
Right.
Just saying. But look, you're a serious person and neuroscience, and no, there's something I need you to solve for me because I've heard you talk quite extensively. Obviously, The Big Bang Theory is just a huge show, and you kind of think. I remember seeing the beginning. I was thinking it's so funny, but then they'll run out of geek jokes after one season. No, they didn't. They never did. But I remember you talking about the very sort of at length the difference between what a nerd and a geek is, and I'm not. I have to have your thinking on this because Jonathan Friedland, on the one hand, doesn't read science fiction or fantasy at all. Okay. Like you say Lord of the Rings to him, he thinks it's a jewelry store. On the other hand, Oxford, wrote 12 books. Look at the size of his library. Could you just solve this to be a nerd, not a geek?
Look at the size of his glasses. He's a nerd.
So
he's
nerd. Okay, so nerd. Okay.
Got it.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I need an expert.
Yeah, you can be a nerd and a geek if you'd like to be.
Okay.
Yonit, do you think step forward Yonit Levy, do you think, for the double title? Because Yonit is a science fiction, I would say, obsessive and true fantasy, and have done like three. How many degrees had you done by the time you were 25? I think 3. 4.
I think you get both.
I get
she
both.
Gets
it's
nerd
like
and geek.
Double Jeopardy? Yay. Okay, I get
nerd
both. I'm very
and
happy.
Geek.
Oh.
I'm not sure I like where this turned out. I was going to make
You're
fun
the
of
one
you.
who opened the conversation.
I know. It's my fault. I should never do that.
Total nerd and total geek. Whereas you, Mayim, I think what? Are we going with geek and nerd both, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
She's a neuroscientist. I mean, come on.
So
that
nails geek.
No, so he didn't get it. We just went through it, Jonathan. It's because he doesn't get it. So
the
nerd is usually, the nerd part is usually kind of more like the academic, like the brainy, the cerebral, like often kind of serious. Like it has nothing to do with kind of cultural stuff. Whereas geek, you'll usually find, I don't like to call them obsessions just because I'm a scientist. There are often fixations or strong interests in things like Star Wars or Star Trek or that kind of geek culture. Many people are geeks and they're not nerds, meaning they love fantasy or sci-fi and stuff like that, but they have no interest in kind of like academically they wouldn't want to have a library. It wouldn't occur to them.
Right. I see. You have unpacked it for me very, very powerfully there. I do now feel educated on that point. And Yonit, you definitely still are both. The film is available on Amazon Prime and other places, and it's called As They Made Us. It is the directorial, how do you say that? It's the first film directed by our very special guest, Mayim Bialik. Thank you so much for being on Unholy.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, Mayim. Thank you.
Really a pleasure to talk to you both.
So Mayim Bialik there settling what has been a long-running debate between us about nerds and geeks. As always, the answer to almost every Jewish question is always both. And pretty well always. And Mayim Bialik got us to that place. But it's a great pleasure just hearing it again.
A lesson learned.
Such a good guest.
This was a lesson learned for me. Never try and trap Jonathan Friedland in a question because they'll do the same to you. And you don't want that to happen. And I think since I've learned that lesson, it's just learning it the hard way. I think a lot of what you said about, being a Zionist in Hollywood and obviously what that entails and the way that she said that word is not, it's imbued with different meanings and how she wanted to talk about that. Also, I think many interesting points about female empowerment, right? Being the person who's writing this film and then saying, oh, someone else is going to have to fix it. Someone else is going to have to direct it until the moment she realized, no, actually, I can try doing that. Which I found very inspiring. So that was our conversation with Mayim.
Next week, Yonit and I will be back, but with an a brand new, up-to-date, current edition of Unholy. So do listen in for that again. And Yonit, you will have succeeded in getting me back to the grindstone and to hard labor, which I know is what you've been wanting all summer.
4 long weeks I've been waiting for that. Yes, so the 3rd season of Unholy right around the corner with new and wonderful conversations waiting for you soon.
This podcast is brought to you by Cyber attacks can be prevented. Checkpoint. You deserve the best security.